Just to start off, if you don't know who I am, my name's Matt. I'm the creator behind The Detail, the ultimate Michael Jackson documentary channel. And if you haven't seen my face before, that's because I generally don't turn up in my videos ever. I'm more behind the scenes. I do all the researching, the editing, the compiling of all the videos. Yeah, this is a pretty unprecedented time for me. But unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures. And obviously, this weekend it's been absolutely crazy with Michael Week and the release of the Michael biopic movie. I've seen it twice. I saw it once on Wednesday in a preview, and then I saw it at IMAX on Friday, and I'm probably going to see it again. And I have lots of thoughts about it. I've already done a video about the film itself earlier today. And yeah, I think, this is a huge moment for fans at this point, and there's going to be lots of people discovering Michael Jackson during this time. So I thought, I was kind of conflicted on this period of time, whether I should do a video, should I go on camera, should I express my thoughts? Well, my channel's not really like personality based. I don't know whether people want to hear my opinion because, I usually focus on mostly facts and just coming from a very journalistic approach, and do people want like a movie review from me? But quite a few of you have been asking me for a review of this video of this movie, and do value my opinion in some way. So I've decided to do that, and there's actually a video hopefully coming out on Thursday, which is my full review of the video, and where I think it was really strong, where I thought there was weaknesses, where I think there was lost opportunities, what I thought about the performances, the costuming, the sets, that type of thing. So to just give a bit of context, so I started my channel in 2019. It was April 2019, and it was just after leaving Neverland. and and there was rumblings even back then that there was going to be a biopic about Michael Jackson, but it was always in the background. Will it actually happen? He's been, by this point, he was dead for a decade. Why hadn't they done it before then? And then later on in the year, in the December, they announced that Lionsgate was going to be attached to the movie, and then the producer, Graham King, who produced Bohemian Rhapsody and the Queen biopic, and did very, very well from that we kind of knew that there was some weight behind this. And then periodically, throughout my years doing this channel, you would hear certain news stories about, this person being cast, and then Jaafar, is cast as Michael Jackson, and then it's, and then it's seeing behind the scenes of the production and all that, all that stuff that we were all kind of on tenterhooks about. And I was still dubious until literally I saw the trailer that this was going to be a real thing, that this was going to be a proper movie that fans were going to enjoy all around the world and would be of the stature that is warranted for Michael Jackson's life and career. Because, the estate, we've had some good things come from the estate since Michael Jackson's passing. Some were not so great, Thriller 40. But, so I was kind of holding my breath for it. I was a bit like, is this going to be good? Who knows? But when I saw that first trailer that came out in November, of the initial trailer, for this movie, I was really surprised and happily surprised about it, that it seemed like they had, put the budget in, it built excitement, momentum. I really knew that it was going to be something really exciting. So I was really, really hyped for this period of time, and that they were going to create a film and also put the backing and the marketing behind it in order to make it really do numbers, and I'm really glad they have done so. If we talk about the marketing, the rollout of this film, I've been very impressed by that. They've literally, in my opinion, pulled out all the stops in terms of making sure that this is a huge success for Michael Jackson and the estate when it comes to Universal and Lionsgate's involvement. From London here, there's buses with posters. There's a huge billboard outside my, down the road from me. I'm seeing activations everywhere. What I'm seeing from online, where they have these like touring DJ booths, and then you got Nia Long and Common Domingo, like in New York City, like, dancing to Michael Jackson's music with DJs, and having these like big billboards that are like interactive, and and then having all the interviews with like the daytime talk shows and the different premieres. They've really, really pulled out all the stops, and I'm really, really glad to see that. And I think it's, it just builds anticipation and excitement, and a bit, a huge moment for fans during this period of time. When I went to the screening on Wednesday, can't believe that was just Wednesday, there were fans there. A lot of them were, 15, 16, 17 years old. These are people who weren't even alive when Michael Jackson died. Like, these are people who have never had a big fan moment in their lifetime. And I remember, as someone who became a fan of Michael Jackson, it was really the early 2000s, and it was like really not cool at the time to be a fan of Michael Jackson. It was when he was like a freak, kind of laughing stock, plastic surgery freak, throwing babies off balconies, like. And then all of a sudden, when he died, there was this huge like swell of like mourning and admiration for him, and suddenly everyone came out of the woodwork and embraced him, and all shared this like common experience that love for his music and him as an artist, which was a completely new experience for me, and that I kind of thought I was just like a fan in my own little silo, and I didn't realize how far-reaching his like impact had been. And this is the exact experience a lot of young fans are having today, and I think that's a very exciting thing to see. The only thing about the marketing that I would have to critique is that I wasn't invited to anything. And I tried. I have certain friends who are in... oh look, I got an AI summary on TikTok. It says, discussing the new biopic and sharing thoughts on the film. Join the conversation. I have a couple contacts who work in talent PR. I got the emails for a few PR companies who were doing stuff in Berlin as well as in the UK, and I didn't get anywhere. No one gave me an invite. They said that there was no opportunities available. So I'm a little bit, sore about that. But then, I feel like the marketing around this film has been a lot about trying to engage a new audience. And maybe they just see, look, this guy talks about Michael Jackson every day. This audience is already locked in. They're going to be coming. We don't have to worry about them. We need to, reach out to a broader audience of people who might be light Michael Jackson fans or not really know much about him, but like pique enough intrigue that they might go to the cinema. So I understand that, but I would have liked to have been involved in some way. But I made my own way as well, into it as well. And also, I don't have any kind of arrangement with the estate. I've barely been in contact with them. I've never met any of the Jackson family. I'm not associated with anyone who works for Michael Jackson or is involved in any of his projects. And I kind of like it that way, because I don't feel emboldened or beholden to anyone, and I can talk in any manner which I want to, and be honest, and have a perspective that I know my audience responds to, and that I enjoy speaking without being being concerned that I'm going to offend someone. So let's go into some of the controversies around the production. So an obvious one is around the family internal politics, that there's certain people and who didn't want to be depicted in the film. Obviously that included Janet Jackson. Rebe Jackson wasn't seen in it. Who else wasn't seen in it? I think... And then Diana Ross didn't want to be seen in it as well. Now, I'm not surprised that Janet didn't want to be depicted in the film, because from what I know, and I've done my own documentaries about Janet Jackson, is that she's very protective about her own legacy. And ever since the late 90s, she kind of took a stance that Michael Jackson did, that if you don't take control of your own narrative, other people will. And she's very against... her legacy, which she has very much her own legacy as a performer, as a iconic artist, that if you don't take control of that narrative, then she'll just be stitched onto anything that has been done for Michael Jackson and for Michael Jackson's benefit. And I don't blame her for saying, I'm not really happy with this. I don't really have any creative involvement in this. This isn't really to make me look good or to benefit me and what I'm doing in my life. So I'm just going to bow out. And I think fair respect for that. I don't know why Rebe wasn't represented in the film. I know she's obviously a little bit older, but I think in 1966 she would have been 16 or 18, let me know. So maybe she was out the house, or maybe she just didn't want to be a part of it. I don't know why. Diana Ross, I think that's interesting that she didn't want to be represented in the film as well. Again, maybe, I mean, someone like Diana Ross needs to worry about this, about her own legacy and how she's portrayed in media, and particularly when it comes to Michael Jackson and her story with Michael. I recently updated and expanded on a previous video that I did about her and Michael Jackson and their relationship, which could easily be misconstrued into being something. Oh, okay. Someone is saying on TikTok that the AI summary of my video is calling it Leaving Neverland 2. So I don't know how to change that, but definitely not talking about Leaving Neverland here. How that could be misrepresented and misconstrued, and I think she would definitely not want to be a part of that, especially in a production where she doesn't really have much control. Janet Jackson needs a biopic. I 100% agree. I really wish that would be coming at the same level that Michael Jackson's has. I don't think her documentary was a bit of a disappointment. I really would hope that they put a lot of energy into a biopic about her, or just a really, really good documentary about her. But we'll see. And then obviously the media narrative, one of the big controversies is that the critics' review of the film was scathing initially. And one thing I have to say about that is this film was never going to be a critic's darling, right? This is not, if you're not a fan of Michael Jackson, if you're not if you don't like his music, this is not a film for you. If you're someone who just likes cinema and you admire the the art of filmmaking and want to see that progress to the best it could ever accomplish, this is not the film for you. This film has always been and always intended to be a mass cultural moment for fans, for a commercial audience to bring in lots and lots of money in the box office and to propel Michael Jackson's legacy forward for a new generation. So it was never going to be something that critics would go watch Hamsnet or another sort of darling of the Oscars and Academy Awards, and then go see this and go, oh yes, this is equally just as good storytelling as this. I think so that was never going to happen. And I feel like this drummed up controversy of, they just, what do they call it, deleted Michael Jackson's allegations from his life. They're just saying that it never existed. They're not even covering that time period. Like how can we be so dense about this? And obviously everyone knows the backstory, that they were originally going to be covering the allegations, but because of legal reasons, they had to pare that back, and they weren't able to talk about it. And I don't know what they're going to do for the second film, but yeah, that is a criticism that they have. And one thing that just kind of annoys me about this is that it kind of portrays this idea that the only lens you can look at Michael Jackson's life, his significance in pop culture, music, technology, the industry, media, celebrity, can only be seen through the lens of allegations. That's the only story that is worth telling about Michael Jackson. That there's no other element of his life that needs to have any focus on than the allegations. And I just find it so boring. I find it really boring because there's so much depth. Obviously, I'm a testament to it. I have a whole career of talking about so many different aspects of Michael Jackson's life. But there's so much depth and complexity to his life, to just nail it down to, well, where's the allegations? That's all anyone wants to talk about. It's like, well, no, some people are so bored of that subject. Like, personally, I'm so bored about the allegations. I'm not saying it should be deleted, but I just don't think it needed to be, a focus of a biopic that doesn't even span that period of time that they're talking about. And one thing that I find really annoying about mainstream media about this is that there's no nuance in the discussion. I don't know where it is like in other countries, but in the UK, it's treated like this done and dusted, like, well, there's lots of speculation about Michael Jackson. That means all these allegations must be true, and that if people are seeing these films, then they must be, morally corrupt in some way, or they must be going through some kind of mental dilemma about their moral compass on this, and that, well, they must be separating the art from the artist. No, there are huge swathes, and you're completely incapable of reporting on the world in which you're apparently meant to be reporting on, that there are huge swathes out there in the world who don't believe that Michael Jackson was guilty. They just don't. There's unsubstantiated evidence against it, and that there's no mental gymnastics that they have to do in their mind in order to go and enjoy a movie about his life and career and dance and sing and dress up and do all that thing, because there is no evidence. He was found innocent in a court of law. These are allegations that have been going on for decades, which we still have no, clear idea whether they're true or not, and probably weren't. I'm the type of person who don't like expressing my own opinion. I don't express my own opinion on my channel, because I, in the truest sense, want to be impartial and speak about the facts. But I just find it, and I'm just an individual who has a YouTube channel and can do what the hell I want. But these, like, mainstream media who are meant to be going through all these checks and meant to be completely objective and have, not express their own opinion, and then they have such one-sided depictions of Michael Jackson and reporting of Michael Jackson, and they're not even willing to say, and have it as part of the debate of, like, well, maybe some people just don't believe it. Maybe some people, it's not a problem. They go through all these things about how people are having to really reconcile with themselves about this person. So that's what I have to say about that. So let's get on to the movie. So I'm going to start talking mental gymnastics on... Actually, let's take a couple questions before I get onto the movie. Because I really didn't know how I was going to do this, because I was thinking, should I talk about the narrative structure? Should I talk about the performances? Should I talk about the costumes first? I think I'm just going to go chronological when it comes to... the biopic, and what things I picked up on, what I thought was good, what I thought could have been improved. So let's get some of your questions. Also, they left out how MJ met Quincy during The Wiz. They missed out the whole of The Wiz, and I think it literally had to do with Diana Ross. They cast someone as Diana Ross, and they didn't use any footage with her. So I think that's why they had to get rid of The Wiz. It felt like I felt like I was at his concerts, plus MJ the Musical. I haven't had any... And this is the thing, like, this film has done $217 million in, like, 3 days at the box office. You can't get people to go to cinema for nothing, but they're coming out in their droves, dressed up, dancing in the aisles to Michael Jackson. He's the highest selling dead celebrity of all time. He, the charts are streaming, like, he's still as significant and as culturally relevant as he has ever been. And then, the mass media just have to belittle and demean his legacy and how big of an artist he actually is and the popularity that he actually is. And look, if it was a case that, lots of people were put off by Michael Jackson and, sales were plummeting and that, he was no longer relevant, that is just, factually, from the numbers, this weekend shows it more than ever. That is just not the truth. And I don't know why they don't just report the truth that Michael Jackson has a huge fan base, that he is obviously a huge global artist still to this day. Irrespective of how you report the allegations or not, it is not something which impedes people's enjoyment of him, his artistry, and how, his music and any output from his estate. Right, I haven't seen the movie since the Endgame. I came out for MJ. That's what I'm saying, and I always knew this was going to be the case, that it was going to be the biggest biopic, that it was going to be the biggest musical film as well. MJ has gotten bigger. He has gotten bigger. There's just absolutely no doubt about it. Do you think Michael Jackson would have been successful today if he was alive? I don't know. I think Michael Jackson's celebrity was of its time period. We don't have these mass media cultural figures like we did back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. He was really a product of his time, and his legacy is a product of its time. It's like saying, would Barbra Streisand be a huge star now if she started? I really don't. I don't know. I don't know what type of artist he would be today. I would hope that there would be a place for him, but I think it's it's I think you hope that talent would come out and be overtake all sort of timing, but I think he was definitely in the right time for the right was it in the right place in the right time to really capitalize on his superstardom. Someone said they don't stop till enough get montage was gorgeous. I wish there was more off the wall music. It would be interesting if they do in a part two. I agree. I absolutely love the scenes with Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. I wish they played Rock With You. I wish they did that for the Triumph tour because I love his rendition of Rock With You on Triumph rather than Ben. But yeah, he's timeless, timeless. I think this biopic shows you he would. Yeah, that's true. But I think that the thing that was so unique about Michael Jackson is that he really had a cross-generational, cross-cultural appeal that is unlike anything today. Our media landscapes are so fragmented that we don't have those like cultural touchstones like we did in the past. And that I can speak to many people from all different countries around the world, like I am currently right now. I mean, this is a huge global audience who are engaging with each other right now about Michael Jackson and, are able to connect with each other on that level. And I think that is unique in terms of cultural figures today. And I feel like it's something that we need more than anything, if I'm honest. So yeah. I really hope there's going to be a director's cut of this film. I would love to see all the deleted scenes because I know, from the leaks that came out that there are quite a few deleted scenes that we didn't see in the film that weren't scrapped just because of the allegations. So, right. I'm going to have a glass of water and then I'm going to start on the film, guys. Right, so the film starts, so the opening credits start, and then it's Wannabe starting something. You hear in the background, it's the real concert footage. Oh, sorry, I've got to do a puzzle for TikTok, there we go. And it builds the excitement, the anticipation. I really liked the beginning of that, and then it's, just shows the back of Michael Jackson's head, and then it fades into Gary, Indiana. And I think that was a really good decision to start placing it in Gary, Indiana, right at the beginning. Sorry, I'm going to do questions at the end for anyone who's wondering about the question. I'm going to do it after I've done the childhood period of Michael Jackson's life. So I think it's really good that they started off with that period of time. I really like the eye for detail that they had in the film where, for example, they're performing Big Boy, which was the first song the Jackson 5 recorded with Stilltown Records before Motown. So I really like that they put that in. I like that they showed the 3-tiered bunk beds in the bedrooms because it was only a 2-bedroom house and they had six brothers in one bedroom. So that was 2 3-tiered bunk beds that they had. Them calling Joe Joseph rather than Dad in this, I think, was significant, as well as showing Michael being inspired by James Brown and learning the drop, the split drop from the television, which is something which he's spoken about in his in interviews and things like that. I think there was definitely missed opportunities during this point. I think there could have been a real narrative and also like visual contrast between Gary, Indiana versus when they went to LA and Motown and becoming a huge success. I think they could have shown it almost in the capacity of like Wizard of Oz. So like Michael's Kansas was like Gary, Indiana, and then his Oz was LA, and it's palm trees and it's bright skies and it's full and bright. And Gary, Indiana, they show it as being fairly gloomy, but I think it could have looked a lot more desperate and a lot more bleak and hopeless. They talk about in interviews that, um, yeah, they talk about in interviews that there was like gang violence outside of their house, that there was poverty around them, that there was no real opportunities there. And I think they could have really like drove that home, that Joe was looking for a way out, that like there was no way of him getting out of this town unless he was going to nurture this talent in his boys, and that they could make something of themselves. They were kind of in this desperate situation, and I feel like they kind of soften the poverty aspect. The house looked fairly spacious in the film, and it was absolutely minute. I mean, you had Joe and Catherine in one room, you had 6 boys in another, and then you had Latoya and Janet, and I think for a period of time Reby on a pull-out sofa. Like they were literally jam-packed, and had absolutely nothing. They were living in abject poverty, and I think they could have shown that a little bit more. So I think them not so much showing the hardship and the kind of drive behind Joe to really whip his kids into shape in order to get them out of there, was a missed opportunity, and I think that contrast would have really worked with the film. Then with the Joe family dynamic, in one of the opening scenes, we see that he beats Michael Jackson with a belt, and it's meant to be very shocking. From what my understanding of the beatings that he used to perpetuate, it was actually a lot more severe than what they showed on the screen. That I think Michael talked about being stripped naked, covered in oil, so that it didn't break the skin, and the beatings would go on for hours. So obviously it's a 12. They don't want it to be too severe. But I think there was ways that they could show Michael Jackson's dominance over the family, and the sort of fear that he put into his sons, and into the wider family in like other ways. I think him being a very volatile character that could fly off the handle, was had no issue about being violent or being aggressive towards each other. It creates a very volatile, anxious-ridden environment. The air changes in the room once you enter it, and there's lots of discussion around Michael actually, saying we would, our hearts would sink when we would hear him drive up to the driveway, or his key goes into the door, because we just didn't know what was going to happen. And I think even just showing things like Joe Jackson there with a whip, like while they're rehearsing, and being physically intimidating in that way, I think that could have portrayed more of the abuse and the childhood trauma that caused, rather than just a one-off beating, which they show in the film. I think it's interesting how they portrayed Jay Friday, just mentioned this, how they portrayed Michael Jackson before fame, and they show him as being very softly spoken and very timid, and that's not what Michael Jackson was like before he was famous. Apparently he was a very rambunctious, very confident kid, very strong-willed. He was a leader of the pack. He was, he would backtrack his dad. He would hit back. If he was hit by his dad, he would run away from him. So this wasn't, this wallflower, which they were trying to portray him as. And I think, again, it was a missed opportunity to show how he was this fun-loving, great kid in Gary, Indiana, with absolutely nothing, but at least was a child and, didn't have the pressures of fame. And then to show him as a child and in the middle of megastardom, that he becomes, a sort of shadow of his former self, where he becomes a lot more serious and a lot more, that loneliness kind of descends onto him. I think that was a missed arc. Then they show, so it's the rise of the Jackson 5. It's an simplified version of events, that, Suzanne DePass sees Joe backstage at the Chicago Regal Theatre. Apparently Gladys Knight was involved in the in discovering Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5, as well as Bobby Taylor. But yeah, it's kind of a messy discussion, so I understand why they did that initially. And then So they show the recording of I Want You Back and a couple of the songs, which were their initial hits. And, with this, I really just feel like they really underplay how huge the Jackson 5 were during this period of time. I mean, we see them in a studio and they're performing, I think it's I Want You Back, I can't remember now. And then they show a graphic of like, the single going up to number one, but they don't even within that montage show that they had four number ones, which is completely, I mean, unheard of at the time other than the Beatles. And they were instant successes within like, they were world famous within like 3 months. So they really, really downplayed that. And I didn't get any sense of kind of like the hysteria, them being mobbed, that their lives have changed dramatically, that like stardom like literally falls onto them and it was go, go, go immediately. They just show them in a studio performing a song and then, a graphic that one went to number one. So I was quite disappointed in that. And then they show like a major historical inaccuracy for me is for them to go Los Angeles, Encino, California, 1971, and then it's them rolling up to the Havenhurst estate, and showing the house which is situated on the property today. So if you don't know, many fans don't know, but the property that is on Havenhurst estate today was not the property they moved into. The original property that was there was a very light, modern, mid-century type property. It had like a sunken living room and shag pile carpets. So it was very of its time, very 1970s. And a really interesting fact about it is that in the early 80s, after Off the Wall, Michael Jackson bought the property off his parents because his father had racked up so many debts. Pretty much it was to pay off his debts. So Michael Jackson bought it and then he gifted 50% of it to his mother. So he owned the house with his mother so that if she ever did choose to leave Joseph at any time, she wouldn't have to be concerned about being financially compromised in any way. That literally she could say, Joe, you're out, and he would be out. And I think that was a missed opportunity because what I think the essence of this film could have been and what I would have liked to have seen is the changing of the guards, that Joe for so many years was terrorized this family and was the one at the head of the household and the one calling all the shots. And then, Michael, even though he had a lot of power and a lot of and a lot of the success of the family was hinged on Michael. He didn't know he could assert that power over him, and then quite quickly the guards changed, and that Michael Jackson was actually head of the household, and actually everyone had to accommodate with what Michael Jackson was going to do, because if Michael Jackson didn't get what he wanted to do, and they don't do an album, or they don't do this concert, or they don't live the way that Michael Jackson wants them to live, then it's not happening. And I think it's a very interesting, that tension and dynamic and that struggle between the two from father and son, that I think is also very relatable and that lots of people can understand. But it's on a huge scale because it's Michael Jackson and he's the biggest superstar ever. And you have someone like Joe Jackson who's a very strong personality in himself, but isn't, hasn't got really any real weight or power behind him other than his presence in Michael Jackson's life. So I definitely think that there was a lost opportunity. The way that they portray Michael Jackson post-fame, once he's hit Motown and he's a huge success, I think was a real missed opportunity there. They show him as being very domesticated, that he has his own childhood bedroom, he has posters on the wall, he has, he's reading fairy tales, he's, playing with his rat, that he's talking to his mum on the kitchen table. That was not Michael Jackson's life. Michael Jackson was working constantly. I'm someone who's documented every single year of Michael Jackson's life, and he was constantly They would be doing 150 tour dates every single year, recording albums, rehearsals, photo sessions, TV shows. They were constantly working, doing stuff. And when they had exhausted every arena tour that they could do in the US, then they were off to Japan, then Australia, then the UK, then around Europe. Because there was this internal anxiety that Michael Jackson and the Jacksons were this huge group now, but how many, how long is this gonna last? Like, he's only gonna be cute for a while, so we better, rinse this dry, because, in 4 years' time, people might not even care who Michael Jackson is. So he was worked and worked to the bone. And I think that this again was a really lost opportunity, that they could have shown the contrast of Michael Jackson exhausted, performing on a bus in a hotel room, in the studio, and kind of giving up his whole childhood to pursue this fame that his family wanted and then demanded of him, this pursuit of his career. And then the contrast between the fruits of that labor, that Joe Jackson would be, in Havenhurst in a brand new car, and he's got a big flashy watch on, and he's got furs, and he's there, chatting up girls and like having the life of Riley and living off the success of Michael and his brothers. I think that was a missed opportunity, and I think it would have shown later on the stakes that were there for Michael Jackson to want to get out from under Joe Jackson's control, because he knew that Joe Jackson's didn't have his best intentions, at heart. He didn't care for Michael Jackson. He just wanted to rinse him dry as much as he could. And then we get into the most odd scene for me, which is of this earlier era, so childhood Michael Jackson. Is this fairground scene where they're playing I'll Be There, they're performing I'll Be There to like a very casual crowd of like 200 people, and it's like everyone's just at the fairground anyway, and there's a Jackson 5 concert there. Yeah, I guess we could just stand around for a bit and watch it. I mean, like, again, this is like my concern about this, that there really wasn't any visualization of the how much of a phenomenon and the hysteria and the mobbing and everything that was going on for the Jacksons at the time, that people were just kind of standing behind the barriers, kind of looking longingly at Michael Jackson's eyes as he like reaches his hand out to a girl. I feel like it's quite bizarre that they use that as the ending scene, and it kind of betrays the Jackson 5 as just being this nice band, kind of popular, had a couple songs, you might know them. We don't delve that far into it. But but really wasn't that big of a deal when they were so huge at the time. So I wish there was more justice to the Jackson 5 era in that respect. So I'm just going to answer a couple questions, because we're getting into the 1970s era now, and I don't want to completely forget people. Would you ever review the Jacksons' Dream TV miniseries and compare it to the biopic? That is actually a good question. I was thinking about doing a video mostly about comparing all the biopics that have ever been produced about Michael Jackson. There's not that many, but I saw a really good video. It was about The Star Is Born, and how each version of The Star Is Born is kind of is representative of the time in which it was created. So I think that would be a really interesting video to do, and probably will come at some point. Not sure right now, but actually, yeah, maybe it will be coming. That's actually a good idea. You've actually given me a good idea. In a world divided, Michael came in time. That's true. Someone wrote a question but then took it down. Okay, anyone got any questions before I move on to the off the wall era? I want to see the off the wall era more. I can't watch things where all people do a nitpick. Okay, people just fighting in the chat here, are they? Your videos are very good for my autism. Thank you. Watching this movie, my friends yesterday, made me feel like Michael Jackson was still here. It was a great feeling. Oh, that's brilliant. My opinion, the Man in the Mirror biopic was the worst ever. I think that's a lot of people's opinions, to be honest. So I don't think you're the only one in that respect. They showed Bubbles in the 70s, and I was so mad. Yeah, I think they showed him, I think it was like 1981. I know he came about after, I think it was like 1984, 1985. I love the details content. Thank you for all the coverage you've done. Janet as well. Oh, thank you so much. No one's fighting in the chat. Okay, good. Good. I'm just looking at TikTok. very nice things being said. Oh, what did someone say? Are you planning to do another plastic surgery video on Michael Jackson? I've kind of covered that. So, it occasionally comes up in videos if it's relevant. But yeah, nothing in the works right now. Right. So then we have this kind of breakaway scene. It fades from Michael Jackson in the Jackson 5 performing I'll Be There to Michael Jackson as a young adult, looking out the window across Los Angeles and in the room with Quincy Jones. And I have to say, I really love the set design. It looks very 70s. It feels very luscious. I love the colours in it. I think in general, this film feels like there's been a lot of thought put into the sets. The composition of that, which I really enjoyed. Again, it's oversimplified, this idea that Michael Jackson that Off the Wall was Michael Jackson's first attempt at breaking away from his family. We all know that Michael Jackson's first real project as an adult outside of the Jacksons was The Wiz, but they couldn't show The Wiz because Diana Ross was not going to be involved in it or didn't want to be portrayed in it. So they showed that it was actually Off the Wall. This was something that wouldn't have been a shock to Joe when they signed with Epic Records after Motown. It was with the view that they wanted to do more solo music with Michael as well as the Jacksons. So that was always in the cards. But I really did like the details that they put into this period of time when they showed Michael Jackson the studio and he lowered the lights. That was something which he used to like to do so that he could concentrate on what he was articulating and the resonance in his voice. That was very true to him. I thought one thing that was a really interesting aspect about the makeup is that Michael Jackson had, I think it was on this side, had a little pimple or a little birthmark or some kind of scar on the side of his face. And in the biopic, they also show that as well. And what's interesting is that, I don't know whether through makeup or he had something done, but it was removed in the mid-80s sometime. And later on in the film, that birthmark, that mark on his face is gone. So I really enjoy that level of detail in terms of the makeup. But yeah, then we get into the Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. He had a birthmark. Yeah, that's what I thought. Then we get into the Don't Stop Till You Get Enough sequence, which I absolutely love, seeing him perform that in the studio, and then it kind of transition into, the fans running down the queue to try and get his, an autograph while he was signing at Tower Records. Again, that brings up so much more energy, that time period, that momentum that he had during that period of time. It was the first real, solo huge success that he had, which he could fully own for himself and say, yeah, I did that. I am capable of so much as a solo artist. I don't need my brothers. And yeah, I love that momentum and that kind of spontaneity and optimism during that time. And I think they portrayed that in a really great way. I think, I would have loved to have seen Rock With You. I would love to have seen other songs during that period of time. I like that they put Studio 54 in, even though it's not, chronologically correct. Obviously, it's a little bit before Off the Wall that he was at Studio 54. But it gives the view that, Michael Jackson with Off the Wall kind of became this, disco star and that his star was rising during that period of time, which was, that was correct. Then we get into the early Thriller, the transition from Off the Wall to Thriller period. And again, there's lots of nice personal details here. I really like that they include a lot of his animals, which obviously meant a lot for him as a person. They have, Bubbles the monkey. We have this, quite keen scene where he receives Bubbles for the first time. We have Louis the llama, which I'm really glad to see as well, because he was a big part of Michael Jackson's life during that time. The giraffe in the garden. There's, a scene with Muscles, the snake. And I think, again, visually as well as narratively, this kind of shows Michael Jackson's impact on his family and his family household. That I said it previously, the fact that he built this house, when he bought the house in which Haven Hurst sat on. He tore down what was there and the family home that everyone lived in, and then just built this French Tudor mansion in this kind of Disney-esque style, with his recording studio, and it had a menagerie, and it had these shop fronts with like flowers, and it had toy shops, and and it was completely constructed out of what he wanted. There was no consideration about anyone else in the family, even if his mothers at the time said, I wasn't so sure about this because I'm worried that it will be too dark. I don't really know whether I like this style. But Michael was just like, nope, I'm paying for it. I want this. This is what the house is going to be. And it's going to take 3 years to do. And you're going to have to live somewhere else. And then, he was just kind of, he was not being mild-mannered about it. He was paying for it. It was his dream house, and that's what he was building. And so all the family were living around this kind of menagerie that he was building for himself, and they were kind of living within the Michael Jackson universe that he wanted to create, and they really had nothing to say about it. I like that they put in things like Michael Jackson's manifestation notes. I think that's a really nice touch. I think that's very true to him and his character during this time, that he was, really into his, visualizing what he wanted out of life. When Thriller was such a huge success, that was not surprising to him. He knew that it was going to be a huge success. He planned for it to be like that. And that was part of, the internal power that he believed that he had to own his own destiny. So I'm really glad that they put that in. I love that they put little details in, that he loved the Three Stooges, Gene Kelly and Singing in the Rain, Charlie Chaplin, and Modern Times. I really like that they put these details and these things that he was into, that he loved video games and that he was going to toy shops and stuff. Like, that's, who he was as a person. So I think it's good that they added that in, and, it's genuine to who he was. Then it follows on to the plastic surgery scene. So when Michael Jackson gets his first nose job, which I'm really glad they... I'm really glad that they approached this in this manner, because Michael Jackson's take on this, it's a famous line that he said he only had 2 plastic surgeries. In his book, he said that he broke his nose and he had to get it fixed because he broke it in a dance rehearsal. But they were more honest about it, they said, and it was very true of that time that Michael Jackson was fixated on his looks and how he'd be perceived by others, and he was a perfectionist, and he felt like his looks were very important, that he needed to maintain, and if he could improve the way that he looked in any way, then that would help him in terms of his pursuit for fame and success. So it is true that he got a nose job before Off the Wall. They show it as being after. So that's one thing they didn't get correct. But then he got the nose job. And what I think is funny is that they do this big scene with Joe, who, finds out, and, he's amused by it. But every single member of the Jackson family got a nose job within like 2 years, including Joe. So it's not like a huge shock to him. They were all doing it. And I just think it's funny. I think I don't know, it's interesting that LaToya was okay for them to put a line saying, oh, maybe I should get a nose job because, oh my God, talk about Michael and his nose jobs. I mean, LaToya's way up there as well. Then we have the boardroom scene with Michael where he meets John Barranca. And I really like this scene because I think it shows another side of Michael Jackson, which not many people got to see. And I'm glad that it's shown even in just a small way. But this kind of ruthless, ambitious, business-minded Michael Jackson, in which he later became, he had that side to himself where he could literally shut the emotion off immediately and be incredibly severe to in order to get what he wanted. And he had a very formulated, strategic side, and I think they portrayed it. I mean, obviously it's John Barranca, he's involved in the production, he's portrayed in a way that he wants to be portrayed, but they kind of portray it in a way of Michael Jackson finds this other very business-minded person, and they link arms together, and they collaborate with each other for this pursuit of Michael Jackson becoming the biggest superstar in the world. And essentially that's what they did together. Then they get into Joe's firing. so, via fax, which is obviously very simplified. If you saw my Victory Tour documentary, you would know that Joe Jackson never, up pretty much from Motown onwards, was never the sole manager of Michael Jackson and the Jacksons. He There was other management involved, of course, because he was their father and they were underage. He would sign things off. He would have to approve stuff. So he was definitely involved in their career, but he wasn't their sole manager, and he never managed Michael Jackson during that period. But there was obviously, tension within Michael and Joe's relationship, because Joe always wanted more of an influence over Michael Jackson's career. More like he wanted, more of a cut than what he was getting at that period of time. And it was really during this, the Thriller period, not before Thriller, but kind of during Thriller, that Michael Jackson completely cut ties, and any notion that he would, that Joe would have any influence over his career and life from that point onwards. But, I understand it works as a scene, it works narratively around Michael Jackson breaking away from Joe and using John Barranca in a very business-minded way to just send a fax to Joe. And it's probably something that Michael did quite a lot, because he wasn't confrontational, he didn't scream and shout at people, he would just cut them off. And that's how he did business a lot of the time. One scene that I really liked in this part of the film is when Katherine Jackson stands up to Joe, and where she's saying, you can't beat kids anymore, you can't tell them what to do, they're adults now, Michael is his own person, and you've just got to accept that, and if you don't accept that, then I'm leaving. And I think that is very, very much their dynamic during this period of time. And I think that's very true to what they were going through. And I think it showed for the first time, Catherine was no longer this wallflower who was going to take everything that Joe was willing to throw at her, that actually she had some position through Michael, by Michael giving her 50% of the house, that she wasn't beholden to Joe, and even morally, that she didn't feel like she had to uphold this marriage, and that if he wasn't going to behave and act reasonably, then she had no problem about leaving. And what would he be left with if Catherine left him or kicked him out? So I really, really like that scene, and I wish there was a little bit more of that. I think that was a really good insight into their dynamic at that period of time. Someone saying, you're talking about this film like it's well made. There are elements that are well made. I'm complimentary, but I'm also saying weaknesses as well. And that's a very good crossover into what I'm talking about next, because I'm talking about some of the worst scenes in the film, right? For me, I know lots of people like it, but it was the Beat It gang scene. I'm sorry. Firstly, it was solely inaccurate. That never happened. So if you can't remember the scene, it is Michael Jackson's in the studio producing Thriller, and then he sees a news report about the Crips and Bloods gang members in Los Angeles. And then all of a sudden, somehow, they got a bunch of gang members to go to a dance rehearsal, and it's so cringe, because it's all these supposed gang members who are all going, yo, 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 we're really, we're from the ghetto, but we love Michael Jackson, and can I have your autograph? And it's just so cheesy and so not true to life, and it doesn't depict, this is when I understand the criticism of people saying this is sanitized and this is, a fabrication of Michael Jackson's life, because this scene in particular is a complete fabrication. And then you've got, Jaafar as Michael saying, with music we can change the world and all this stuff. Again, it just comes across as a bit too goody two shoes, and I wish they would have just depicted what actually happened, which the Crips and the Bloods and gang members were involved in the video for Beat It. They were invited, they wanted real gang people to be part of the video. They were originally going to be there for the 2-day shoot, but after the first day, Rob Giraldi asked them to leave, because there was kind of rumblings and they were getting too combative with each other, and they were fearful, essentially production was fearful of them. I think that would have been a more interesting scene to do, but I understand narratively they essentially had to include Jaafar Jackson recreating the dance that Michael Jackson did during the Beat It video. Like they had to do it. And, you know, I'm sure many fans like this scene because they just want to see that recreated, and that's just a key part of the Thriller era, and that's what they wanted to see. But I think it's one of the worst scenes in the film, if I'm honest. And also one thing that just completely took me out of it, I know it's such a small detail, but on the floor in that dance studio is like the most plasticky vinyl laminate flooring with the grey toned wood that is so 2010s. It so takes me out of it being 1983. I just wish, couldn't they have just picked like an old warehouse or something? Why did it have to be like a really cheesy studio with really obviously non-1980s decor in it? Like, I just really didn't like that. And then the next scene, which the next scene that I had a problem with is the Thriller video. So again, it's so iconic. It's something which everyone would expect in a Michael Jackson biopic. It's what the fans wanted to see. And they show Michael Jackson. I don't like the way that they portrayed the Thriller era, that it was kind of like, we're in the studio, then we're shooting a video, then we're back in the studio, then we're shooting a video. It kind of makes it look like it was a very disjointed process of writing Thriller and producing Thriller. Also, it doesn't show all the characters that are involved, you know. They barely, I mean, they mentioned once Rob Templeton during the Off the Wall era, but they barely make any mention about Quincy Jones and his involvement in the film. Then they show Michael Jackson watching horror films and him thinking of like what the song could be, and then he thought of Thriller, which if you've seen my Thriller Forever documentary, you would realise that it wasn't Michael Jackson who came up with that song title. He didn't even write the song. It was called Starlight. It was written and produced by Rob Templeton, and through guidance by Quincy Jones, he said to him, I think this is a great song. I think this song title could be the title of the album, but can you think of something better than Starlight? And then he came up with Thriller. So to show Michael kind of going through this creative process and then selecting Thriller and then going into the video, that's not what happened. And I think, you know, showing the Thriller video, my problem with this is that any casual viewer of this film has probably seen that music video. It's been out for 43 years. They've probably seen it 100 times over. I've probably seen it thousands, right? It's so embedded in our psyches. We know every single shot, every single movement, every single facial expression, the dance, you know, off by heart. And to recreate it shot by shot, you are opening yourself up to just comparison. And I think this is the period of the film. There are times when Jaafar Jackson looks very much like Michael Jackson. Like, it is very uncanny. I think when he's producing the Thriller album, I think he looks a lot like Michael. I think when he's on the tour bus during the Triumph tour, he looks a lot like Michael. Later on in the hospital while talking to his mother, he looks a lot like Michael. But in this music video, I think he looks the least like Michael Jackson. And I think it's because we know exactly what that video looks like. And when you recreate it shot by shot, we're just seeing all the differences that don't quite match up. You know, the outfit that isn't quite right, or the hair that isn't quite there, or the makeup that isn't quite so, or the colouring, or, you know, even like, you know, Jaafar Jackson, he has a different body composition to Michael Jackson during that time. Michael Jackson was waif thin during that time. So it just looks a bit odd. And I think narratively in the film, it doesn't add anything. We know that video. We're not getting, there's no narrative device or plot line within that. We're just getting a recreation of Thriller for like no reason at all, particularly. And yeah, I just think, obviously Jaafar Jackson has put so much into his performance, and particularly performances like that, and you know, has really worked himself, and you can see that effort that he puts into really trying to recreate those in a really true fashion. And I just think it was misguided for the people who produced the film to include that in the way which they did. I'm not saying it didn't have to be included, but I think they could have come from a different angle and not just completely recreate a video that is already iconic and is you can't recreate, essentially. Right. And this is kind of my issue with the Thriller era as well. Um, it never really grasps exactly the magnitude of the Thriller video. The way in which they portray Off the Wall and Thriller is like they're kind of one and the same. Like Michael Jackson was really popular with Off the Wall and then he was really popular with Thriller. There was no kind of continuation of his stardom excelling way beyond, like Off the Wall, Michael Jackson, it cemented him as a very popular music artist. But Thriller really took him catastrophic, was it stratospheric, like, he became an industry in himself. He was what every other artist aspired to be. And they didn't show that like pandemonium that literally the world in which Michael Jackson was inhabiting during those years was fast evolving and changing. That his entourage was growing. That the people that wanted to get to him were even more desperate. That there was different influences from here, there, and everywhere. That Michael Jackson's life was getting smaller because the world around him there was so much more scrutiny around him. That there was more reporting. I think the Thriller era, and they show fans kind of like fanning out over Michael Jackson and. I have the problems with those scenes because they always look really fake. It's always people just kind of like going like this and that's it. If you see crowds of people who are mobbing Michael Jackson, they are screaming, they are pushing. There is like despair within it. It's not just people like flailing their arms around and that's it. I understand doing CGI is expensive. I understand that it's expensive to get lots of extras, but I think there's things that they could have done to show the time period. And that's something which I always try and do in my documentaries. One of the biggest compliments I could ever get in my work is someone says, I remember that era and you've captured it so well. I feel like I went back in time. I've really relived that period of time again. And that's something which I wish they did more of, where you had overlays of voiceovers of people saying, Michael Jackson, the greatest selling artist in the world. The greatest artist, in the world, or Michael Jackson, like another number one hit. Like everyone's talking about Michael Jackson. And then they show headlines of, Michael Jackson, the greatest entertainer of 1983. And then show magazine covers. He was on so many magazine covers. He was on like 4 People magazine covers within a space of like 3 months. And they could have just shown like a magazine stand with all these covers of him and people grabbing them. And I don't know, it could have just given more of convey more of the magnitude of his stardom during that time. And it just felt so much more contained and a lot smaller than what I would have hoped. And then we get into Motown 25, which again is kind of similar to me with the Thriller scene. It's not shot by shot of Michael Jackson's performance, but again, it just encourages more comparison between Michael Jackson and Jaafar and whether he did. I mean, the performance is impeccable, but in terms of the costuming, whether he looks like Michael Jackson, whether the hair is quite there, whether whether his stature is like Michael, these are all things which people are going to compare with. We all know with social media, I think they're already up already, but it's people putting side by side the two performances and everyone's going to rip it to shreds, essentially. Not to say it's particularly bad, but they're going to compare. And again, it doesn't add anything to the narrative. And I think what I would have liked to have seen is at the end of Motown, at the end of the Jackson's performance at Motown 25, show the brothers embracing and then Michael Jackson doing his own thing, and then the start of Billie Jean, and then show the brothers in the eaves going, oh my God, like this is, one of these pivotal moments where we realize Michael Jackson is not just our kid old brother anymore, that he's like gone beyond like a megastardom, and that this is really a turning point in his career, and see the reaction from people in the audience and their response and from media outlets, and then pan out and see like how audiences at home, their response to it, have like multi-generational families all screaming and shouting, and then having kids, trying to imitate the dance move and go, go Michael. Like they could have made more of a moment of that and really represented how much of a cultural moment that was in culture during that time, and how much of like a water cooler sort of performance that was. And instead they just wanted to recreate, step by step and the full dance, including the moonwalk, Motown 25, which we've all seen, and it doesn't add anything to the narrative. So I think that was definitely a missed opportunity for them. I've got a couple questions, so I'm just gonna stop because we're going into the Pepsi accident, and then I'll get back onto it. So I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting any questions that are coming up. Adam Martin, hello Adam. It's been a while. If you're still here, loved watching this live. Keep up the fantastic work. Pleasure being a small part of the team. Ah, that's so brilliant. Oh, wait, I clicked off it. Here we go. What did he say? Why did he have such? Okay. If you ever want someone to come and talk about being on set, I was lucky enough to be on the set 2 years ago. Also met Michael many times. Even spent time at Neverland back in 2023. Okay, that would be exciting. Literally, if send me an email. I would definitely be interested in speaking. I never really get opportunities like that, so that would be lovely to speak to you. And then I had this honestly shouldn't have been a movie they put on. This honestly should have been a movie they put on Lifetime Channel. No, I don't think that can be the case. I definitely said with Michael Jackson's life that this couldn't just be in one film. That this needed to be, warranted it being more. Like The Crown, like it needed to be like a major mini series like that rather than a standalone film. I feel like it's too much of a subject matter unless you're talking about a very specific moment in Michael Jackson's life and career, and his, I don't know, this period of time or his family dynamic, or his sort of artistry and the way that he created music and what recorded and his inspiration, but to try and document everything in a satisfying fashion, I think is almost impossible. So yeah, right. I'll get into it now. Right. Just gonna drink some water. Okay, so the next scene is the Pepsi accident, which I think is done fairly well. Again, it's the same criticism that I have, that it doesn't feel big enough, right? Michael Jackson, during the accident of... Okay. Okay. Wait, let me just check some things. That will just come up. Okay, that's fine. Panic over. Right. It just doesn't feel big enough. Michael Jackson was doing a huge production. There was 2,000 extras in the audience. There was entourages. There was music executives. There was Pepsi executives. There was a huge camera crew. There was makeup and pyrotechnics people. And there was fire safety. It was a huge production. Michael Jackson is at the center of it. All focuses on him. And then disaster strikes. And I think they could have shown that a little bit more, that Michael Jackson was like this kind of pressure cooker of like pressure put on him. And then suddenly, he's there in front of thousands of people, completely vulnerable, and his hair's been caught on fire. And it could have been a life-threatening incident for him. And I think the scale of it could have been demonstrated. Obviously they do afterwards with the ambulance and showing the pandemonium, outside the hospital and stuff. But I think during the actual incident itself, it just felt quite small and quite contained, which I was a little bit disappointed about. Then they spoke about, I think it was kind of overdone how dramatic this accident was. Obviously, it was a serious accident, but I don't think people were really talking about at the time that it was life-threatening and that he almost died. He had a serious injury, but it was more cosmetic, as well as pain management as well. And obviously had a lasting impact on him. But I think during that period of time, they didn't really know what type of impact it would have on him. So I feel like that is a little bit overplayed. They do talk about some of the surgery that they have to do on him, that they would have to have this kind of like balloon contraption go underneath his skin to stretch the skin out, and then they can take it out and take out the scar tissue and then place that skin over it. They did do that, but they did that many years later. They did that in the first half of 1983. sorry, 1993. So after it was after the Super Bowl, it was after Oprah, it was after the Grammy Legends Award, and then to the beginning of the second leg of the Dangerous tour, he, for about 3 or 4 months, wore exclusively hats the whole time. And apparently he had that surgery in that interim period before the first and second leg of the Dangerous tour. But he had a surgery in the April of 1984 before the Victory tour, and then he had another surgery immediately after the Victory tour. So I think it was literally like 3 days after the last show, and there's some quite gnarly medical images which are online, which you can see, where it shows that, the affected area, and then that they've removed the skin and they've stapled it across, which sadly wasn't effective enough, and therefore he had to have another surgery. Then we get into, and this is the part which, again, I understand why people who are critical of this film say that it's too candy-coated, that it shows Michael Jackson as being, a bit of a messiah, when they show Michael Jackson in the hospital bed and he's saying, I'm going to do the tour, I'm going to do the tour because, this is my second chance, I'm going to do it for the children. That didn't happen. Michael Jackson was going to do the tour anyway. He decided to do it because of PR reasons rather than, this epiphany that he had because of the accident. I don't think that I've never heard that story that Michael Jackson did the Victory tour because he wanted to save the children, and it was, a second chance for him. Then we get into the Victory Tour, the last day on the Victory Tour, which was in Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles. And quite funny that they show Michael and his brothers all crowded together saying, we're going to do this, and kind of pumping each other up before the show. From what about from my Victory Tour documentary, that was definitely not what happened during that period of time. That was definitely not what happened. Michael Jackson, from the middle of the Victory Tour onwards, was not speaking to his brothers in any capacity. So I think it's just interesting that in the film they've portrayed the brothers as just kind of being bystanders from, the tyranny of his dad and the control and the effect and the trauma in which his father caused, but they don't show any of the tension between Michael Jackson and with his own brothers, and that kind of rivalry and that kind of power dynamic that they actually which they harbored at that time as well. Sorry, MJ Fangirl just said something. Agree with you. I love the movie overall, but in general, I don't think it captured how big of a megastar he was, and all the fan crowd scenes seemed lackluster. Yeah, that's kind of what I got as well. And for a film this huge, with this huge budget, yeah, I felt like they could have done more. And I don't think it would have cost loads of money. It's stuff that I do in my own documentaries to try and really push that narrative and really represent how huge he was at the time. Even just showing kids dressing up like Michael Jackson, or I don't know, the influences he was having over culture. There's no real context of that time. It's kind of like this Michael Jackson bubble, and nothing ever is really discussed. Even showing a picture of Michael Jackson at the White House, or him, at the getting his Hollywood Walk of Fame. These are all such iconic moments which weren't included. I mean, the Grammy Awards scene was literally in a montage. It was half a second on the screen. So yeah, it just didn't capture exactly how huge he was during that time. But anyway, I thought it was interesting that, the narrative structure of this really shows that the brothers, that they were just bystanders to Joe's tyranny over Michael Jackson, and that they weren't part of any of the dispute with Michael Jackson, which wasn't true during that period of time. Then we have a whole rendition of Human Nature, which I love. It's one of my favourite songs, and I really enjoyed that performance. And then we get a whole rendition of Working Day and Night, which was not the song that was, that they were performing during the time in which Michael Jackson quit the Jacksons on the last date of the Victory Tour. I don't know whether it has something to do with like licensing, that the estate has that they have licensing for Working Day and Night, but not for the Jacksons track Shake Your Body Down to the Ground. But that scene, that's pretty much how things went. Michael Jackson was talking about, it's been a long old 20 years and, this is our, was it farewell tour? This is our farewell tour. He did all that. And then, I think it was fine, with Joe trying to go up to him and Michael kind of, not really listening or doing his own thing, continuing on. I don't really have much to say about that. I do think the characterization of Joe is very one-dimensional. He's kind of just like, there's, and there's lots of people who argue for Joe as a character in Michael Jackson's life, that that he pushed him to become what he was, that, in essence, even though, he was from a generation that, didn't really know how to articulate his emotions, and that, like, he thought he was doing good for his family, and that, he wanted to protect Michael because of, he knew that there was all these vultures forming around him, and that everyone wanted a piece of the Michael Jackson pie. Now he's the biggest thing ever, and that he wanted to keep him close to the family network and have them all benefit from that, and have them all protect each other, and kind of, have this protective shield around him. But the problem with that is that, Joe himself didn't have the best intentions either. So it was, very hard for Michael Jackson to decipher who was good in his life and who wasn't, and who was using him and who wasn't. So I really would have liked to have seen more complexity in terms of that, like, dynamic and those nuances. But then again, this is, a big commercial film where people want to see the music, and they're not looking for an in-depth discussion about, a coming of age story and the dynamics between different, family members and things like that. So I understand why it's not in, and it's kind of just like Joe Jackson is just a bad character, and then at the end Michael is able to just do a big F you and leave, and that's it. And then the end of the film is Michael Jackson rushing onto the stage to perform Bad. And again, I wish there was some kind of context of this, I wish there was some kind of voiceover saying Michael Jackson sells out, Wembley Stadium, 5 times over, Princess Diana and Prince Charles are here. He hasn't produced an album in over 5 years and he has 5 number ones, and, that he's, he's back on top, or this is his first solo tour. Some kind of context. We literally just go from one concert to the next. It's 3 songs back to back. Like, it just didn't really feel like there was any kind of story at the end. And I think it would have been so fun. One thing I did like about this performance is it showed lots of angles from Michael's perspective. And it did show some of the enormity of how huge that crowd was. And, that kind of energy that Michael Jackson fed off from when he was performing. So what we see as an audience is not what he sees. And you can see why he was so, like, exhilarated with this, this mass of hundreds of thousands of people. Well, not hundreds, but, tens of thousands of people in front of him. So... but I would have loved, just in the audience, there'd just be one small shot and it would be someone dressed as Princess Diana, like, clapping along or something, I think, again, that would have just added a little bit more context for the time, and I think that would have worked really well. And then the last thing you see the performance, and the last thing you see is his story continues, which is obviously very telling. I think it was quite a bold move to put that at the beginning of a part 1, where it wasn't confirmed that this film was going to have a part 2. It's not as bold as saying, part 2 coming, but it implies that there's a next film. And as we know, as of today or yesterday, that there is going to be a second film, and it's in production. It's scheduled to be released in 2028, which I never thought was going to happen, because I was even saying to MJ Fangirl a couple months ago, this film has everything the estate wants. It has all the hits. It has all the iconic moments. It, shows the rise of Michael Jackson. It has people leaving the theatres going, wow, what a nice guy. Love that music. That was so iconic. Love that. The next film is going to be a very different story. It's a very different film for a completely different audience. And, they say they want to be really honest about the next period of his life. But I don't think they can do it in a satisfying way that fans will love it, that people who are, cynical of Michael Jackson and his behavior, I don't think they can do it in a way which will satisfy all those audiences. So it kind of opens them up to a certain amount of criticism. But we'll see. I'm really looking forward to it. And obviously, there'll be lots of leaks and reports coming out. There's even, recently a few leaks of what some of the costuming and the makeup has looked like during that period of time. Because I know they've already filmed stuff at Neverland, where they recreated all the funfair rides and stuff there. So yeah, those scenes have been produced. But anyway, so this is so my final verdict is that I think overall, some people were asking me before, what my overall rating out of 10. I would probably give it a 7.5. I think there's lots of things, small things that they could have improved that really would have put it up to 9. But I think 7.5. I think a really good effort. I think and none of it is to do with the performances. I think the performances in the film were great. But yeah, I think some of the creative narratives and choices that they made were compromised. If I had it my way, the narrative would have gone like this. I would have started off the film with the Pepsi accident, and it would have been this big reveal, Michael Jackson on top of the stage, and then disaster strikes, and then from there it's kind of shows the backstory of Michael Jackson's the biggest artist in the world. It would show you all the iconic performances and the music videos and this pandemonium around Michael Jackson during that time, and then him trying to break away from his family, and there would be lots of references, a lot of flashbacks to him as a child and the loneliness and the desperation that he felt during that period of time. I think that would have articulated what they needed for the narrative of the story without it feeling like they're just kind of rushing through in chronological order what happened. And then they could pick out parts that were relevant to the story rather than feeling like, oh, well, we need to add this in because that's also an iconic moment. We can't miss that out. So that's kind of move. And, but I would have ended at Dangerous, at the Bad Tour. And it would be kind of like Michael Jackson finally becomes his own person and is the biggest icon all on his own. So yeah, I think overall the film gave what fans wanted, and it was hugely successful with fans and people who moviegoers of all kinds. So it ended up doing what it needed to do. And it was highly affected in that. I think the biggest strengths in this film was Jaafar Jackson. I think he was absolutely exceptional. I think he completely embodied Michael Jackson in such an uncanny way. And I don't know whether it's just because he's a Jackson and that he probably picked up certain things from his from his uncles and from his father. But even just mannerisms, I remember when he was rehearsing for the Beat It dance, he was kind of going like this with his mouth, and that's something that Michael used to do as well. So he really embodied him, and I 100% believe during the film that it was Michael Jackson. So I'm really, really glad about that. I think the details and those kind of little nuanced moments that fans would pick up on, I think those, I really liked those, and I liked that there was that level of detail. And yeah, I think essentially, it was a good balance of showing Michael Jackson the superstar and showing a bit of him and his personal life and his personal struggles. I think that was a good balance they put in there to satisfy both audience types and what they're looking for. I think the biggest weaknesses in this is, the kind of cringy, candy-coated moments that seem a little bit... I mean, Michael Jackson in general was a bit of a goody two-shoes, and this is kind of overemphasized in this. And it's kind of a bit too good to be true. And when they're kind of fabricating scenes and stuff that didn't actually happen, I feel like that it just loses the credibility of this film, I feel, a little bit. Again, the scale of the fame being underplayed, and the kind of pandemonium that was going on during that time, the Michael mania, the influence and the impact of Michael Jackson during that period of time. I really wish they would have really tried to portray that a lot better than what they actually did. And yeah, I feel like often in the film it's more about recreating what already exists rather than actually trying to come from a different perspective and actually focusing more on the storytelling. That's one of the criticisms I would have. But yeah, I think it's, I think it's a really exciting time to be a fan of Michael Jackson during this time. I would say that this moment is probably equates a lot more to the time, when Michael Jackson died and that huge surgence of love for him and his music and fans reconnecting and discovering him for the first time, and or rehashing their old love for him. So I think it's I think the film's done everything that it needed to do, and it's a brilliant time for us. I can say for myself, my numbers are like all over the place in terms of the channel. And I'm getting a lot of new subscribers, whether on TikTok or whether on YouTube. So yeah, I'm obviously very happy with that, expanding my own audience. But yeah, in terms of my own channel and what my plans are, my plan was originally, so since the beginning of the year, I've been doing one documentary every single week. And after the release, I was going to reduce that down, but I don't think I can. I've got so much to talk about this film that I'm going to probably have to do a few videos quite quickly, including the one where someone said comparing each of the biopics, which I think would be a really interesting position to take, and I should probably do that sooner rather than later. But yeah, that's kind of my goal right now. So, right, that's me, and that's my position on the film. If anyone has any kind of questions for me, please put them in the comments below. I'm going to be taking questions now. Just going to be scanning through the chat, see if there's any super chats or anything that someone's put in. No, so I'm all free to answer a couple questions. Probably going to do that for the next 15 minutes or something. Right, I'm here since day one. Miss Billie Jean, thank you for being here since day one. I love your documentary, it's very professional. Thank you so much. I wonder if Macaulay Culkin is betrayed in part 2. Yeah, I mean, it would definitely make sense. He was very crucial during that period of time. I wonder what Macaulay Culkin's what his view on that would be, that he would, approve that or not. Where was Frank DeLeo? Frank DeLeo was represented in the film. He was one of the Epic executives. They show him speaking to Michael about him, his plans to get it to have an album produced by Quincy Jones, and then they show him later on after the success of Off the Wall, like having a cigar. Which was something which Frank DeLeo did a lot. Did we cover Off the Wall? Again, there's so many periods, I hope they go back a little bit, because, we got nothing about the ATV, the Beatles catalogue, nothing about We Are the World. I don't know, how much of the Bad era are we going to cover, in the sequel? Because, for me, Bad as a song being the last song, it kind of means nothing. It's not one of the most loved tracks by Michael Jackson. It hasn't really stood the test of time, I don't believe. It doesn't really say anything about him. It's not really I don't know. I think it would have been better if they did "Man in the Mirror" as being the end song on the movie. I feel like that would have had more emotional resonance with it. But "Bad" is just like a song. It's just it's just there. So yeah, I didn't think that was the best part, but I hope that they go more into the Bad era. Because I love The Way You Make Me Feel and Dirty Diana and songs like that, which I hope is portrayed in some way during that period. Bad isn't really that good, but it's a very vibe song at the end. I know, yeah, they wanted to keep the energy up. But then we had Human Nature, but then we had Working Day and Night, and yeah, maybe they just wanted people dancing in the aisles about it, they just wanted to keep it light. So where was The Way You Make Me Feel? I like the dance move, everyone on the floor dancing. So The Way You Make Me Feel wasn't in the film. So let's hope it's in part 2. What things do you see in the marketing or pictures that you wish most would have been in the film? I mean, I liked, when there was those behind the scenes shots of Michael Jackson with Catherine, and he was profiteer was it pioneering as a Jehovah's Witness, and he was going door to door. I think that would have been something interesting to put in the film, and it was something which was very real, and that he did, because he was a devout Jehovah's Witness during the time. Even at the height of his fame in 1983, 1984, he was going around to people's houses dressed in disguise, and talking about the word of God. So I'm kind of disappointed they didn't put any of that in. Did you notice that in the Victory Tour farewell announcement, Working Day and Night was played instead of... Yeah, I said that in my commentary, and I think it has something to do with the estate having ownership over Working Day and Night and not Shake Your Body Down to the Ground. So I think maybe it was just less complicated to try and get licensing for that. Do you think this biopic was surface level to the MJ historians? Yeah, it was very surface level, I would say. They touched upon very lightly most things. Very lightly touched upon it, but no real depth at all. That's kind of my conclusion, which is fine. This film is meant to be for, commercial audiences that know a bit about Michael Jackson, knows the music, know the iconic moments, but, they're not up for a 5-hour interrogation about every single element of his life. Can you make a video talking about specifically Michael Jackson's fame and popularity? I think I don't know whether I've made one particularly on that subject, but it's definitely something that I speak a lot in my videos. So yeah, it's definitely something that I cover a lot. Talk about the lack of Billie Jean video visuals. Yeah, I thought that was a little bit disappointing that they never showed the Michael Jackson Billie Jean video. And they kind of portray, that Michael Jackson did Billie Jean, Beat It, and Thriller, and still wasn't on MTV. I mean, the reality is that Thriller would have never been produced without MTV. MTV paid for 50% of its production because they bought the licensing for the making of the Thriller video. And by that time, Michael Jackson was already a bona fide video star. This was at the end of 1983. So it was that spring, summer when Billie Jean was launched, and then Beat It, and it was just on heavy rotation all throughout that time period, and was cycling out of being in the the number one spot on the charts throughout that time. So to kind of portray it as like Michael Jackson did Thriller and then said, "Oh, can you put it up?" It just wouldn't have happened. There was no vehicle other than MTV for Michael Jackson to portray his to broadcast his music videos. So it wouldn't have happened. Do you think that MJ's complex relationship with Diana Ross be part in the next movie? I don't think so. The fact that they cast someone in this film and then they had to cut the scenes out because Diana Ross didn't allow her image to be used in this film kind of shows you that they kind of have nowhere to go with that. So I don't think she'll be in the film at all. Which I didn't expect. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done an updated version of my documentary about them two. So, but I'm glad I have it anyway. I feel that they could make an entire movie based off the Off the Wall and Thriller era. Well, they essentially did. I mean, a lot of the film is set between sort of Off the Wall and Thriller. But yeah, I mean, you can take any year of Michael Jackson's life and make a whole movie out of it, essentially. I think we must inform people about the deleted parts of Diana Ross and also about The Wiz. Yeah, so The Wiz was going to be, there was segments about The Wiz, but I don't know whether they were shot, but they definitely did trials in terms of the makeup and things like that. But obviously it wasn't in the film in the end. I love your guys' video on their relationship. Thank you so much. I love that video as well. And I think it really shows the progression of this channel. Like, some people were kind of annoyed. They were like, "You've already done this subject. Can you just do a new topic? Have you run out of ideas?" It's like, I did that video 6 years ago. Like, I think as a video creator, I think as a channel, we've progressed a little bit beyond that. So I feel like videos like that really show how I have progressed as a creator and how I'm much more into discovering the nuance and really talking about things on a more complex level than, this person said this person said that. Which, was kind of my mainstay when I first started my channel. I think Michael Jackson should have collaborated with Jamiroquai if he was still alive, though. Well, I mean, Jamiroquai was around when Michael Jackson was alive and it never happened, so I wanted the creative process of writing music between Michael and Randy in the Jacksons era. There's allegedly a 4-hour cut of the movie. I would love to see that. I would love to see that film. It'll probably come out, to be honest. I mean, why not? Get those DVD sales up, make even more money. No, it was updated and really good. Thank you so much. Yeah, exactly. People complaining. Why did the Jackson 5 sing Never Can Say Goodbye before they were at Motown? I think because that song didn't originate from them. I think it was a cover that they did. I can't remember who covered it, but yeah, that song was around before they even entered Motown. I appreciate you doing the updates. I found your channel at the end of 2025. Okay, well then you're a new follower. There's a lot of content and a lot of different... I hate calling it content, to be honest, because, they are documentaries. It's a bit more than just something that you just consume, But there's a lot of documentaries, a lot of videos that you can enjoy if you've only recently joined us. Do you ever disagree with MJ fans on anything? Yes, on many things. We always have open discussions and debates on this channel, so I can't think of anything in particular. Nothing that I wouldn't get cancelled for. So yeah, but yeah, definitely different debates and disagreements. Can't wait for new content. Thank you so much. I've been watched all your videos in 1 month. Oh my God, thank you so much. Are you talking about Indian child marriage? What? Indian child marriage? Never heard of that. What about the comment? Okay, people obsessed with Indian child marriage. Don't know what you're talking about. If you saw the credits, it literally says never written after they joined. The credits had a disclaimer. That's very odd. I didn't know that. Maybe it was, because they didn't show the Jacksons perform any of the tracks that, they used to sing Stand, Who's Loving You. Like, there were certain songs that, well, actually they did show him singing Who's Loving You. But maybe they were just limited with the tracks that they could portray. Like, they could only be Motown tracks, for example. I don't know exactly, but that's something that I should really look into. Not everything is an inaccuracy, it's intentional from the filmmakers. Why do they show Working Day and Night instead of Shake Your Body? Yeah, I've already explained that. What's your opinion on the use of CGI to alter Jaafar's face? Look, I think any way in which they could do it, it was seamless to me. I think the makeup in general was incredible. It was completely seamless to me. I completely believed it. So, yeah, I think that worked really well. No mixture. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I think Michael Jackson should have collaborated with Jamiroquai. Okay, great. MJ had an interview in 1979 or 1980 being fascinated with 14-year-old girls who would marry 30-year-olds in India. Never heard of that. And I think the interview you're talking about is it's the Dateline one that they did with the Jacksons, and I don't remember him ever talking about that. So yeah. How do you distinguish between real facts of rumor and speculation of Michael Jackson, since there's so much false information on Michael Jackson? So, I don't go out there and say, hey, I know the ultimate truth of Michael Jackson. I talk about the reality that he lived in. I talk about this person says this, but this person says that. It's from all different perspectives. So, and I believe that the type of audience that I've built is intelligent enough to say, from that person during that time period, I don't 100% buy that. There's a lot of speculation around Michael Jackson anyway. So, I don't, unless something sounds incredibly far-fetched, I usually just put it in. And I think it's all relevant to his story, that there are certain people who, believe some of the things that were, written about him, which were, completely salacious. And, to kind of, even though it might not necessarily be true, it was kind of part of his story or the media narrative around him in some way. So I feel all those parts are kind of part of the overall story in general. I love the scene where Bubbles first arrived and then playing Twister together. It was so cute. Yeah, like, you have those enduring moments as well. And again, I think that's something, audiences enjoyed seeing and wanted to see, the lighter side of Michael Jackson and the more playful side. So I'm glad they had that. Do you run into a lot of YouTube copyright issues? With MJ Music, not so much because I don't actually use his music in any of my videos. So I'm quite careful with that, and there's kind of ways to get around it. So yeah, I'm generally okay. Sometimes if it's with like interview footage, or sometimes a song will be playing in the background and that causes an issue. But yeah, in general, it's okay. Oh, fuck off. Sorry. Have you ever explored the short life record of the early 90s MJJ music, 3T, Brownstone, Q? No, I haven't. I actually don't know much about Michael Jackson's record label. I think it was very much a trend of the early 1990s. I'm sure that was part of his Sony Music record contract that he did in 1991. But yeah. Do you ever question things that Michael Jackson said himself about controversies like his nose jobs and stuff that he said, saying that he only had two? I don't say that's a lie, but I'll put it down saying Michael. To be honest, I don't think in many videos I've ever said, "Oh, Michael Jackson said he had two nose jobs." Like, I think we all know that wasn't true. I think one thing I understand about Michael Jackson is that ever since he was introduced with fame, he was told that this is kind of a game, that the truth doesn't really matter, that you kind of play this game, and that's part of stardom. The first thing they did was, instead of saying that he was 10 years old, they said that he was 8. And, they played up the whole, happy family narrative, and that they're from the ghetto, and that, that they're this kind of all-American black family, which was all, in Michael Jackson's mind, a complete lie, that they were all just happy and chummy with each other. So I think he had a very simplistic view of media, that he could say what he ever wanted to say and people would believe him, because that seems to be the case with everyone else when they talk about Michael Jackson. But when Michael Jackson talks about himself, it seems like no one believes it. So yeah, I think that's kind of, I don't know, my idea of why he put that out there, and, it wasn't necessarily true, but I think he was just trying to stem the criticism with him and the hyperfixation on the way that he looked. MJ Fangirl said, I was disappointed that they did not fade into real imagery of Michael Jackson. Jackson performing bad at the end of the movie. I look forward to that type of thing at the end of the biopics. Yeah, I don't know about that. I wasn't really expecting that the whole time, because I think if they swapped in real Michael Jackson footage with Jaafar Jackson as Michael Jackson, again, that kind of leads to comparison, and you can kind of see the difference between the two. I mean, maybe it could have been done really well, where you couldn't really tell which one was Michael and which wasn't, and then it kind of, I don't know, it kind of actually makes the impersonation look even better. But I didn't really expect to see any of real Michael in the film. Would you say that they portrayed his vitiligo true to life? I mean, there's a very brief mention of it when he's in the plastic surgery office and they show his hand. I mean, I cover extensively his vitiligo. I mean, I think it's fairly accurate. I think he had, I think it's fairly accurate. I don't think they go into much depth at all. I think it's something they just wanted to approach on a little bit, in some capacity. No Janet, no Reby, almost no speaking parts for the brothers. Yeah, the brothers are literally such side characters in this film. Barely of them have any lines. There's no characterizations. They're just kind of like there. No Captain EO, no We Are the World, no Diana Ross, hardly any Quincy. I'm an MJ superfan, and there's so many inaccuracies for me. I wouldn't say there's so many inaccuracies. I just think, certain things weren't focused on so much. I'm nervous about Jaafar, who's excellent playing 40 plus Michael. His age works for the era he played in, but I feel like it won't work as well with him made up to look like this is it era Michael Jackson. I agree with that. I think he looks off the wall Thriller Michael Jackson. I think it's going to get harder and harder as they go into the eras. Because also a big defining feature of how, the way in which Michael Jackson looked, the way that he looked, was obviously, some of the work he had done, but also he was so incredibly thin, and really gaunt looking. And I think that kind of made him look even more, bizarre, because he just it just kind of exacerbated all the surgeries he's had, and it's hard to recreate that unless you are like of that stature, which hardly anyone is. And yeah, I think that could be one of the issues that the second film runs into. How many future videos do you expect to make regarding the movie? So at the moment I've got about 3 or 4. So regarding the movie, and then I'm planning to focus on videos related to issues that are raised in the biopic. So that's kind of my plan for content for the foreseeable future at this point. Yeah, Randy is not in the movie. Like, I thought it was weird that, when they're in the office scene with Joe, and then they just show, was it 3 brothers? It was just Michael and 3 brothers, and I'm like, where's the other brothers? Like, it's just kind of bizarre that it's called the Jackson 5 and the Jacksons, and there's always at least 5 of them. And there's in some scenes there's only 4. Let me see. They showed his chest having blotches in the pool scene where he's trying to write Thriller. Oh, that's interesting. I don't think I saw that. Maybe I was writing myself. Because that's one of the fun things when I was watching the film the second time. I was taking notes, and people right next to me, and I was really squashed in, and I was trying to write notes in the middle of it, and people were like, "What are you doing?" Like, I thought some people would ask, like, literally, "What are you doing?" Were you in a documentary about MJ's fans during his trial? You look very familiar. No, I'm not that old. I was a kid during the trial, so no. We've got to stop confusing it. Yeah, that's true. Were you shocked at how big of a role Bill Beret had in the movie? He's not talked about much. He's not talked about much to fans. I wasn't shocked. I mean, he was in the trailer. I think that was a nice touch, because I wish they kind of investigated that relationship a little bit more. Bill Beret was like a second father figure for Michael Jackson, and Michael Jackson had a few of those. Barry Gordy was one of them, which we had that sweet moment with him as a child, as well as Quincy Jones was a pseudo father figure for him as well. So I wish that relationship was investigated. I think aside from Michael, Joe, maybe Catherine, there's not much complexities to any of the other characters. I mean, there's not much complexity to any of the characters. But, not many of them get that many lines. Bill Beret doesn't really get that many lines. His brothers barely say anything. There's people in the periphery. John Landis doesn't say anything. There's Bruce Sweetie in there. He barely says anything. Like, there isn't really any kind of, like, characterization of these people, particularly. So yeah. Cassandra has asked, have you seen the Larry Nimber documentary called The Untold Story of Neverland? What do you think of it? I haven't seen it. So is that new or something? I don't think I've heard of it. But yeah, let me know. Anyone else excited for Bad 40? If it's as good as Thriller 40, then I'm not. I think they did a really good rollout with Thriller 25. So, with Bad 25. So I think they should just leave it be for a while if they're not gonna, try and build upon that. Hot take, it's not worth making part 2 if the allegations aren't tackled. We have the American Dream and endless documentaries. Also, give us Lisa Marie Presley. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how far you expect them to go into the allegations. I mean, obviously they're going to talk about them. They're going to depict, the media circus around him. This, the detrimental impact that had on Michael Jackson. But I don't know, like, they're not going to get really in depth of, Michael Jackson did it or didn't. It'll just show like the fallout of it. But I think that era is very interesting, particularly with Lisa Marie Presley and kind of his media moves during that time. That would be something really great to portray. Right. Did you like the Faking Michael podcast? Do you think the casinos will ever be mentioned in part two? I don't. Is it Casio's or the Casio's? I don't know much about them, to be honest, and I haven't seen the Faking Michael podcast, so I can't really comment on that. I'm really sorry about that. Maybe just wanted to. So probably a passive take of a serious problem. It's not a stain on personal behaviour, so the haters get okay. You should do live more, maybe before certain videos drop. I love this live. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, maybe I'll do more. I don't know. I mean, I always say this. I always do this, and I say, oh yeah, I should do more lives, and then I just end up not doing it. So it's always, it's always a limited edition. It's always, a lovely surprise when people get them. So the estate cannot be involved in the second film, which means no music, I think. Oh, okay. I've never heard that rumour that the estate is not going to be involved in the second one. I thought they very much would be. But yeah, anyway, unless you've got any final questions, I think I might be wrapping this up. It's been about 2 hours and a half, so I think that's enough of a live for most people. Just going to see... TikTok is still putting the AI summary of this video as being Leaving Neverland 2, which is a bit problematic. It's been a pleasure. Lovely to meet you. Oh, thank you so much, Alexander. But yeah, any extra questions I'm going to leave dead on 10, so we got another 3 minutes. And then I've got pretty much, I think most recent, the video which I'm doing for the end of the week is going to be pretty much a breakdown of this live. I've already recorded it and I'm going to edit it tomorrow. So it's going to be a full rundown of my thoughts about the film. So I hope you guys like that. I don't think the estate should be involved as they're going to tell the true story. I'm pretty sure lots of discussion. You should go on live often. Do you like the merch? I haven't seen much of the merch. I mean, people going around with a fedora as a popcorn dish. I'm a bit like, I don't know, that's a bit budget. I would love to have seen a glove, but obviously you need a custom mold. Like, it's very easy to just get a party hat and it's a fedora and its mold's already there and you put popcorn in it. But if people are having fun, I'm into it. I mean, the merch that they had in the 80s, some of it was really diabolical, but, we have better options these days. I heard it's not definite. Oh, God, sorry. Right, we've got 2 minutes, guys. Any other question? Your channel is too much sugarcoating. Really? Do you think my channel's too much sugarcoating? Okay. The glove was a cup. Oh, I would have loved to have seen that. I never saw that. And I pretty much, literally my TikTok and Instagram is just like wall-to-wall Michael Jackson content at the moment. So I'm surprised I haven't seen that. Did you see Prince at the end? I don't know what that's in reference to. Oh, okay. The glove was a cup that was paired with it. Okay. I'm a bit happier with that. Who saw the TikTok where the girl's like, I've got my Michael Jackson costume and this is my glove, and it was like an exfoliating glove that you would have in the shower. And she was like, I don't know whether I could get away with it. And like everyone in the comments was like, look, it works. Like, we move. Prince Jackson made a cameo. I did not see that at all. Jackson's son made a cameo in the film. Right, guys, I'm gonna go. Thank you so much for being here, and hopefully speak to you soon. And I look forward to putting out the video this week. So enjoy that, and yeah, speak to you soon. Happy